This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service that showcases fantastic films from all over the world. Start your 1-month free trial right now by going to mubi.com/entertaintheelk.
"Did you put your name into the goblet of fire, Harry?" he asked calmly.
Harry, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
No, sir.
You asked one of the older students to do it for you?
No, sir.
You're absolutely sure?
Yes, sir.
I've seen this clip from the Goblet of Fire circling around the internet a lot recently. It highlights the occasional stark differences between Dumbledore in the books and Dumbledore in the movies. And fans of the series will often point to this specific moment as their main argument for why they prefer Richard Harris's Dumbledore from the first two movies over Michael Gambon's Dumbledore from the final 6. But why does this scene feel like a misunderstanding of Dumbledore's character from the books? And which is the better Dumbledore? Real quick, I feel like I'm going to save myself a lot of headaches in the comments below if I just make a few clarifications. Videos like these are largely suggestive, a lot of it stems from personal preference and opinions. You may have some kind of emotional tie to one over the other for a number of reasons. You may prefer an actor's overall filmography over the others. You saw Richard Harris's Dumbledore first. You spent more time in the series with Michael Gambon. There is no right or wrong answer. This is feeling, not fact. But to help this video from tipping into pure subjectivity, I'm going to try and use more objective standards. And I'm going to do that by creating measurable categories of comparison, and by going back to the original source material by J.K. Rowling. So let's start there. How does J.K. Rowling write characters? All of the characters in Harry Potter have defining characteristics and descriptions that make them instantly memorable. Lightning bolt on the forehead, bushy mane of brown hair, red hair and tattered hand-me-down clothes. Rowling avoided a laundry list of unnecessary physical descriptions because those tend to wash over the reader. Knowing what kind of pants a character wore and how their jawline looks doesn't really matter unless it's a defining characteristic that helps shape the character in the larger story. Rowling instead constructed her characters around a few of their more interesting characteristics that would tell the audience so much more about who they are. The way they looked, dressed, spoke, and moved. Rowling could paint a picture of a fully realized character with just 1 or 2 descriptions that would really last in the mind of the reader. Here's how J.K. Rowling describes Dumbledore when we're first introduced to him in the opening chapter of Sorcerer's Stone.
"Nothing like this man had ever been seen on Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and very old, judging by the silver of his hair and beard, which were both long enough to tuck into his belt. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak that swept the ground, and high-heeled, buckled boots. His blue eyes were light, bright, and sparkling behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore."
There are details here that are consistently used throughout the Harry Potter series when describing Dumbledore. Silver hair and beard, long robes, bright blue eyes, half-moon spectacles, and a long crooked nose. They're used time and time again to the point that they're associated with who the character is. Whenever Rowling reintroduces Dumbledore in a new book, she quickly goes back to these well-known details that have become shorthand for the character.
There stood the headmaster, Professor Dumbledore. Harry's whole body went numb. Dumbledore was looking unusually grave. He stared down his very crooked nose at them. Professor Dumbledore, though very old, always gave an impression of great energy. He had several feet of long silver hair and beard, half-moon spectacles, and an extremely crooked nose. And in the very center of the table sat Professor Dumbledore, the headmaster, his sweeping silver hair and beard shining in the candlelight, his magnificent deep green robes embroidered with many stars and moons. The tips of Dumbledore's long thin fingers were together, and he was resting his chin upon them, staring up at the ceiling through his half-moon spectacles as though lost in thought. Dumbledore was striding serenely across the room wearing long midnight blue robes and a perfectly calm expression. His long silver beard and hair gleamed in the torchlight as he drew level with Harry and looked up at Fudge through the half-moon spectacles that rested halfway down his very crooked nose. There in the doorway stood a tall, thin man with waist-length silver hair and beard. Half-moon spectacles were perched on his crooked nose, and he was wearing a long black travelling cloak and a pointed hat. Albus Dumbledore was walking toward him, sprightly and upright, wearing sweeping robes of midnight blue. Dumbledore's long silver hair and beard, the piercingly blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles, the crooked nose. Everything was as he had remembered it.
The same details every single time. They become as important as the character themselves. And since Rowling placed such an emphasis on the appearance of her characters, that's a perfect place to begin our comparison between the two Dumbledores. There are a lot of similarities between the two. The long, silver hair, robes, half-moon glasses, but each of them had minor differences that made them stand apart. Harris's Dumbledore wore very regal, deep red robes that were boxier and obscured what is described in the books as a tall, thin figure. Gambon's Dumbledore wore thinner robes of blue and gray that looked more ethereal and highlighted his slender body. He had a tie around his long beard and wore a tassel hat that felt more modern compared to Harris's more customary pointed wizard hat. Alfonso Cuarón, director of The Prisoner of Azkaban, said this regarding Gambon's appearance. It is slightly different. From the get-go, we made changes to give the continuity, but at the same time, it was not about imitating Richard Harris. That would be so bad for both, for Richard and for Michael. Richard was very regal, as Dumbledore is described in the books, and very beautiful, and we wanted to do it more hippie-ish, cheekier, and a little more shabby, and sometimes more distracted. For me, there is no clear winner here. They both have pros and cons to their overall wardrobe, and the differences help differentiate the two actors while still staying true to the character. A majority of Dumbledore's lines in the movies are taken straight from the books, so this isn't necessarily about what they say, but how they say it. This goes back to the scene from The Goblet of Fire.
Harry, you put your name in the goblet of fire.
The words are basically the same. The difference is in the way Michael Gambon performed the line. There's obviously nothing calm about this. And the most frustrating part is that this type of behavior, shouting and shaking Harry, goes against basically everything we know about Dumbledore. He's more of a reserved, stoic presence. It doesn't match the character or the source material. But this isn't the only time this type of discrepancy happens throughout the series. When Professor Quirrell announces the troll in the dungeon in the Sorcerer's Stone book, it says,
There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Professor Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. Prefects, he rumbled, lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately.
It's strong and assertive, but Dumbledore never has to raise his voice and yell. But then in the movie, that's exactly what Dumbledore does.
Silence!
Now, it's not as strong of a discrepancy as the moment in Goblet of Fire, but it's an example of how both made changes to the source material. And that's probably with the director's guidance in order to help set a desired tone and energy to a particular scene. Harris's performance is pretty one-note throughout his two movies. He has the same whispered gravel to his voice in almost every situation. And that's not meant as a knock against Harris's performance. I think he taps into the aspect of Dumbledore's unflappable demeanor. Because if there's one adverb that Rowling uses time and time again when describing how Dumbledore speaks, it's calmly. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore is moments away from certain death in the Astronomy Tower, here are a few of the ways Rowling describes Dumbledore's speech and demeanor.
Dumbledore still showed no sign of panic or distress. He merely looked across at his disarmer and said, Good evening, Draco. Well then, you must get on and do it, my dear boy, said Dumbledore softly. I see, said Dumbledore kindly, when Malfoy neither moved nor spoke. No, Draco, said Dumbledore quietly. It is my mercy, and not yours, that matters now. Good evening, Hammerkus, said Dumbledore calmly, as though welcoming the man to a tea party. And you've brought Electro, too. Charming. But somebody else had spoken Snape's name, quite softly. Severus.
Dumbledore's quiet and calm demeanor only further contrasts the frantic and menacing behavior of Draco and the other Death Eaters, and Harris nailed that aspect of Dumbledore's personality. Now, I really do appreciate the range that Gambon brought to Dumbledore. I especially like when he speaks with a lightness that seems to bounce and flutter with each word. It almost sounds like a melody.
That was fun.
And that taps into the chaotic side of Dumbledore's personality, that speaks in rhymes and riddles.
Oh, by the way, when in doubt, I find retracing my steps to be a wise place to begin. Good luck.
There's a range to it that feels refreshing, unexpected, and never boring. But with that range of speech, you get occasional moments like when he yells and shakes Harry Potter in the Goblet of Fire that feel completely out of character. And for that moment alone, I have to give this category to Richard Harris. Speaking of range, the next group of categories I want to explore have to do with the range of moments each actor was given, the opportunities to show off Dumbledore's skills and power, but also his intellect and emotions. And I know it might be unfair to judge an actor by what they're given to work with, but that's exactly how all acting awards are judged. It's always comparing apples to oranges, never apples to apples. The only way to do that would be to give each actor the same lines and circumstances, and then evaluate. But since there's no way of doing that, we'll just have to take and consider with what each was given. Which had the best introduction in the Harry Potter universe? Harris's Dumbledore emerges from the fog on Privet Drive, a wizard completely out of place among muggles, and before he even says a word, he displays his magical prowess. There's a mystery and agency to his introduction that makes his first appearance all the more memorable. After the first two films, Gambon makes his first appearance in The Prisoner of Azkaban. I love director Alfonso Cuarón's use of long, sweeping shots that make the Great Hall feel so grand. And I love the children's choir parting and revealing Dumbledore as he comes to make his introductory speech. But it can't really touch Harris's opening scene, which carries much more lasting meaning and gravity. Another point for Richard Harris. Which Dumbledore has a better display of magical abilities? It's crazy how little magic Harris's Dumbledore actually does. He uses the Deluminator on Privet Drive and alters the appearance of the Great Hall. Is that it? I'm sure someone will correct me down in the comments, but I think that's it. In comparison, Michael Gambon's Dumbledore has a lot of moments to shine. He saves Harry from falling, reveals the Triwizard Cup, puts his thoughts into the pensieve, restrains Barty Crouch Jr., apparates with Fawkes, goes toe-to-toe with Voldemort, restores a house, sets a wardrobe on fire, uses a badass firestorm spell in the Crystal Cave. In the world of Harry Potter, Dumbledore is widely considered the greatest wizard in the world, and Gambon fully demonstrates the great magical power and skill that Dumbledore possesses. Point Michael Gambon. In a series bursting with so many insightful and inspirational quotes, no character has more memorable quotes to their name than Dumbledore. He's a man who speaks in rhymes and riddles, and offers sage wisdom and words of warning whenever the situation arises. Here are a few of my favorite quotes from Harris's two movies.
It does not do to dwell on dreams, Harry, and forget to live.
It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to your friends. It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Dumbledore doesn't get a lot of screen time in the first two movies, and so his opportunity to dole out memorable quotes was shortened. In comparison, here are a few of my favorite quotes from Gambon's movies.
Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light. For in dreams we enter a world that's entirely our own. Let them swim in the deepest ocean or glide over the highest cloud. A child's voice, however honest and true, is meaningless to those who've forgotten how to listen.
Dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy.
Harry, it isn't how you are like. It's how you are not.
Words are, in my not so humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it. Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love. Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
Again, there really is no competition here. Azkaban alone has as many memorable quotes as Harris's two movies combined. Dumbledore's wisdom in the first two movies came from the sidelines, when the stakes had already largely passed, when Dumbledore was more of a bystander. Gambon's Dumbledore, on the other hand, was more of a wartime leader, having to dole out wisdom, inspiration, and encouragement in the midst of suffering at the hands of Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Another point for Michael Gambon. So the count is tied up 2-2 going into the last category. And I'm not really sure what to call this category, so I'll just go with... When I'm watching the Harry Potter films and watching the different portrayals of Dumbledore, I sometimes think to myself, could the other actor accomplish the same thing? Meaning, could Michael Gambon do everything Richard Harris did in the first 2 movies? And could Richard Harris do everything that Michael Gambon did in the last 6 movies? As I said earlier, Harris's portrayal is largely one note, and that fits with the aspect of Dumbledore's personality that is highlighted in the first 2 films. The grandpa, Santa Claus kind of vibe. That's obviously an oversimplification of the character in all his nuances and emotional depth, but you see what I mean. I watch Harris's performance and I think, Gambon could do that. Now you could argue whether or not Gambon lacks the same quiet intensity and warmth that Harris brought to the role, so maybe you think it wouldn't have been as good. But I still think he could do it. But when I think of the flip side, I'm not sure Harris could do everything Gambon did. And that's not anything to do with what Gambon specifically brought to the role, but everything that was required in the later movies. Harris is a legendary actor, so I have no doubt he could hit every range of emotion. It would have been really interesting to see how he would have tackled the scene in Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore consumes the drink of despair. What I question is the physicality required in the later installments. Here's a description of Dumbledore from The Prisoner of Azkaban that I used earlier.
Professor Dumbledore, though very old, always gave an impression of great energy.
And here's another from Deathly Hallows.
Albus Dumbledore was walking toward him, sprightly and upright, wearing sweeping robes of midnight blue.
Great energy and sprightly. J.K. Rowling describes Dumbledore as more energetic throughout the books than what Harris brought to the screen. And I just don't know how he would have tackled more physical scenes like the duel against Voldemort in the Order of the Phoenix, or fighting off the Inferi in Half-Blood Prince. Harris's Dumbledore looked every bit his old age. And maybe that goes back to the lack of magical opportunities he was given that could have displayed the power that Dumbledore possesses. Gambon's Dumbledore looked spry and vigorous in comparison, which was necessary in the later installments. And even though that energy sometimes went too far, I think he mostly struck a good balance. So I have to give this point to Michael Gambon as well. And according to this, that makes him the better Dumbledore. Now, again, I tried to make this video as objective as I could, but when it comes down to it, this is my opinion. And you'll certainly have your own. I'm sure a few of you might even scream those opinions very loudly in the comments. Chalk this up as the biggest cop-out of all cop-outs, but there is no wrong answer. Both actors took on the impossible task of portraying an iconic character in a much beloved series, and did it wonderfully. Let's just forget this one scene.
Put your name in the goblet of fire.
It's been a lot of fun going back through all the Harry Potter films again. They're all such massive spectacles and hold a special place in my heart. But I don't really watch massive blockbusters all too much anymore. I prefer smaller, more intimate stories with engaging characters. If you're like me and you want to take a much needed break from massive franchises and constant explosions, then I highly recommend checking out Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service that showcases hand-selected films from around the world. Every day they premiere a new film. Whether it's a timeless classic, a cult favorite, or an acclaimed masterpiece, there's always something new to discover. They have so many interesting films broken down into categories, and my personal favorite is their Mubi Top 1000 that has classic films like Charade, Metropolis, Lady Vengeance, The Juniper Tree, and so many more films that I've never even heard of, but I know it's a good place to start and learn more about film history. So do yourself a favor and go to mubi.com/entertaintheelk so you can start your 1-month free trial, see everything they have to offer, and start enjoying movies right now. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it and share it with a friend, and also leave me a comment below. Tell me, which do you think is the better Dumbledore? As I always say, make sure you're subscribed and also click the bell below so that way you're notified whenever a new video comes out. Can't tell you how many times recently someone's reached out to me and told me that, hey, I haven't seen one of your videos in months or even a year, and that's because YouTube isn't sharing it with people who subscribe to this channel. But clicking the bell helps circumvent that to make sure that you're notified, and that way you won't miss any new content whenever it comes out. If you want to help support Entertain the Elk so I can make more videos, consider checking out my Patreon page. I'll have a link below. But another great way that you can help support this channel is by checking out the sponsors that I'm partnering with. Use my code, check out what they have to offer, and give them a chance to earn your business. One last thing real quick, if you're a fan of fantasy, adventure, and wizards and dragons and things like that, then you really need to check out my podcast of Mice and Men and Monsters, which collides classic literature with Dungeons and Dragons. It's hosted by my wife, who's an English teacher, and so far she's guided us through Frankenstein, Moby Dick, and Robin Hood, with many more fun books to come in the future. For a little glimpse of what the show is like, here's actually an outtake from a recent episode where we actually stopped and talked about our favorite Dumbledore in the Harry Potter series.
He got in the outer ring as well, so he rolled an 8. So 1 point for their team.
I give him a Dumbledore clap, where one hand is on top of the other hand.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yes, so good.
That's when he had bad fingernails too, so it really showed that.
Oh, the first guy?
Oh, no. Yeah.
No, the third guy, Michael Gambon, they gave him awful
The
fingernails.
only true Dumbledore.
Wait, he clapped like that? I thought that was just the first guy.
Oh, I
But
thought
maybe
that was
not.
Michael Gambon. I thought that was a Michael Gambon thing. Richard Harris, I thought clapped normal.
doesn't
we don't talk about
matter.
the first Dumbledore. It didn't exist.
Oh my God, we don't talk. Oh, these are
Stop.
fighting words.
The worst Dumbledore. Okay.
Oh my God, I can't.
I am
have to.
on-
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
on-
I cannot do this podcast anymore.
No, don't worry, Kimmy. I'm on your team for this one, and I will
Richard
stay on that
fucking
team.
Harris.
My wife too.
Fucking icon.
Nah, I think I'm with Aaron. That guy was good, but he was so old. How could he couldn't do the things like in 10 years that, I don't know. And it
You
works in
mean,
a
like,
book.
pick
He
Harry
couldn't
up
do
and
the
say, "Did you
second
put
movie."
your name in the goblet of fire?" And he like
Yes.
shakes him in the air
Yes.
and then slams him on the ground.
That's not.
Michael Gambon-
Breaks
That's,
his back and drinks his blood from there.
Michael
That version
Gambon
What are you
Dumbledore.
doesn't
talking
have a
about?
twinkle in his eye, but Richard Harris is all twinkle.
I don't know their names, okay? Number 2 is the only one. Number 1 couldn't make it to number 2, okay?
Okay,
So-
thank
Two
you
is
for
number
inviting me
2.
to do your podcast. I really appreciate it.
See you
This
guys
has been
later.
a great
Have
experience.
a great night.
All
I
right.
have to.
and that's the end of Mice and Men and Monsters. See you later. Signing off. So again, I'll have a link to that below. Go check it out and let me know what you think. And again, thanks everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time.